You're listening to the Otis Jiry channel. The Old McCurdy House by NATASHA Glover. Narrated by Otis Jiry. There is a long road in the countryside near my hometown. On this road are old farmhouses that are yards apart from one another. The road comes to a dead end deep within the woods, next to an abandoned lot owned by a family that has allowed for their house to surrender to shambles. The lot in question is known as the McCurdy House by the locals. The estranged McCurdy family has owned the lot for at least 100 years or more, long enough for there to be a family cemetery directly across from the decaying house. The cemetery details the McCurdys long forgotten, with an additional McCurdy added to the plot every now and again. As a result, the family only visits the land when a funeral procession forces them through their countryside. The family had been under the influence of Mary McCurdy for much of the time that the house stood there. She was the matriarch of the family, and she was fully aware of her authority. She was a mean old woman with a crooked head and a perpetual limp. Mary was known to sit up in her room and look out the window in her rocking chair. Whenever she was outdoors, she greeted no one and cussed at passers-by, whom she did not fancy. Mary was also said to be callous toward her own children, and rumored to have punished them in cruel ways. The most popular rumor was that Mary had kept the oldest daughter, Alice, in the basement for most of her adult life until her mysterious disappearance 20 years ago. Nothing was confirmed, however, especially since Mary had died not long after that. Still, the sinister flavor of the McCurdy lot is pervasive and unsettling. At this time, this McCurdy house is in the possession of the oldest son, Alec. He occasionally drops by to collect the mail and gaze upon his old home, but he never ventures inside. In fact, he decided not long ago that there was no need for electricity in the old home, considering its unpredictable but eventual demise. As a result, the provincial electric company disconnected the power to the old McCurdy house with the flip of a switch and turn of a knob. However, days after the power was disconnected, the electric company received a phone call from Alec McCurdy. As it turns out, his closest neighbor had noticed a single light on the top floor of the old house blazing from across the field. The neighbor had assumed that there was a trespasser and had called Alec. Thus, Alec had called to affirm that the power had in fact been disconnected. After checking the computer system, the company confirmed that the power was indeed disconnected, but they assured Alec that they would send employees out to check the breaker and make certain. My cousin, Mike, was on call that night that Alec informed the electric company of his concern. So he was the employee tasked with manually disconnecting the power to the old McCurdy house. He was not particularly familiar with the gruesome rumors that circulated, so he had no trouble visiting the lot and doing his job. When he arrived, the house appeared dangerous, as the infrastructure looked as though it was sure to collapse sometime soon. And with that thought in place, Mike had hoped that nobody was actually inside squatting in the old McCurdy house for fear for their health and safety. When he opened the door, it creaked on warped hinges and old curled chips of paint flaked onto the floor. An immediate scent of dust overcame Mike as he ventured into the house. The wallpaper was peeling, and dilapidated furniture littered the hallway. The floorboards creaked as he cautiously stepped past the living area and headed toward the basement door. A sudden primal fear invaded his thoughts as he prepared to enter the basement. The darkness stained the atmosphere much like ink, and he was afraid of the unknown. In a moment of clarity, he turned on his flashlight and descended the stairs, careful to check their sturdiness. At the bottom, he scanned the room with his flashlight and saw a mess of white sheets covering the various possessions left behind by the McCurdeys. He then mentally assembled himself and right away found the breaker. Mike then put himself in the zone in order to get the job done in a timely fashion. With his tools in hand, he began to tinker away. As he neared the end of his work, however, he was shocked by an unexpected noise. He stopped tinkering and listened to what seemed like slow footsteps stumbling upstairs. He froze and listened carefully to make sure that he wasn't imagining the sounds. Sure enough, the footsteps paced on the floorboard above him, and they began to slowly make their way toward the basement. Mike hastily darted for the stairs and watched the door. The door was ajar, and he swore that he could hear the footsteps nearing. Instead of waiting, Mike climbed the stairs to tear open the door. When he swung the door open, however, the footsteps stopped abruptly. He shined his flashlight in all directions, but there was no one. He called out again. Nothing. Feeling slightly uneasy, he quickly ran down the stairs to finish his job as soon as possible. When Mike returned to his station, he was greeted with an uncomfortable realization. The main power cable had been cut. It was near impossible for the McCurdy house to still have electricity, and with this new piece of information, Mike prepared to leave the house as quickly as he could. As Mike returned up the stairs and directed himself toward the front exit, he was stopped by something even more unusual. He felt a chill when he noticed that the stairs leading to the top floor were glowing with a faint light. It was as if there was a light on in one of the rooms upstairs. Knowing that if he didn't investigate and the mysterious light continued to shine, it could result in punitive measures against him. So Mike sucked it up and decided to mount the stairs. Mike followed the light down a narrow hallway that led to a small room illuminated by said light. Feeling even more scared, Mike took a deep breath and called out to see if somebody was there. Again, nothing. Mike then decided to venture into the room to be sure that nobody was hiding in the McCurdy house without their knowledge. When Mike stepped into the room, he was speechless. Not only was there nobody there or a trace of there having been someone else, the light vanished. There was nothing. Nothing except a rocking chair sitting by the window, bathed by the deep blue light of the night and a hint of dim moonlight. Mike was baffled. He tried the switch on the wall, but, as he suspected, no light. Shaken up, Mike refused to investigate any further and started down the stairs. Nearing the bottom, Mike was overcome by a sense of alarm as his walking became quicker and they evolved into a sprint. When Mike was out the front door, he began to run. He grabbed for his keys and placed himself safely into his car. He sat for a moment and waited to calm down. Nonetheless, Mike spotted something out of the corner of his eyes. From behind the abandoned house, he watched as an unrecognizable figure hobbled towards him. At first, he thought it was an animal, but he soon noticed that it was a figure of a person. He started to panic as the person neared him. He struggled with his keys in the ignition before he was finally able to see the person in more detail. An old woman with matted gray hair half up in a bun and a face melting with wrinkles was limping towards Mike's car. She was screaming an ungodly screech of profanities as she started to gain speed. Her eyes were sunken in and lifeless. Her skin was pasty and wrapped in rags. She neared Mike with outstretched bony fingers and dirty, overgrown fingernails. She was almost touching the car before Mike started the engine and peeled out of the McCurdy driveway with the screech of his tires. He steadied his vehicle on the main road and hesitantly looked back through the rearview mirror. Still wobbling down the road was the old woman, screaming until Mike had driven out of view. Mike has told me that this was the most frightening event of his life. Though people still report a light coming from the old McCurdy house, nobody investigates it. The most popular rumor is that Mary McCurdy's ghost, bitter in death as in life, haunts her old home and chases off unwanted guests. Whoever the old woman is, she has since been spotted several times. She always chases after her victims. However, it is believed that she is not merely scaring away trespassers. Legend says that if she catches you, she will lock you away, much like Alice had been. You may feel safe in your house, but that's a false sense of security. The old woman has been said to follow people home.